The Great Hall of Luxura Prime was built to make anyone feel small. Towering pillars of black stone reached into the darkened ceiling, where golden light shimmered like distant stars. The floor was smooth obsidian, polished so well that Garrick Voss could see his own reflection as he stood in chains. Before him, the Empress of the Virelian Dominion sat on a throne of silver and violet crystal. Seraphis Valoran was tall and striking, with flowing silver hair cascading over her shoulders like strands of moonlight. Her deep violet eyes glowed faintly, their power undeniable. A delicate golden circlet rested on her forehead, and her dark robes, lined with intricate energy patterns, made her look both regal and terrifying. The hall was filled with Virelian nobles, pale-skinned, elegant, and ruthless. They watched in silence, waiting for their empress to pass judgment. Garrick, a human warrior from the Soul Defense Fleet, stood firm despite the heavy chains binding his wrists. His uniform was torn, his body bruised from the battle he had lost. But his spirit, unbroken. His sharp blue eyes burned with defiance as he met the Empress's gaze. "You are Garrick Voss," Seraphis said, her voice smooth as silk, but carrying the weight of command. "Commander of the human resistance, you stand before me as the last leader of your rebellion. Your people have fallen. Your forces are scattered. And now you belong to me." The crowd murmured in approval, but Garrick's lips curled into a smirk. "I belong to no one." Gasps filled the chamber. No one spoke to the Empress like that. No one dared. Seraphis' expression remained calm, but something flickered in her eyes. Amusement? No, it was curiosity. She leaned forward slightly, a bold claim for a man in chains. Garrick tilted his head. Chains don't make a man a servant, just as a throne doesn't make a ruler strong. The hall fell silent. A ripple of unease passed through the nobles. The Empress had crushed entire civilizations with a whisper, bent the minds of warlords with a mere glance. No one had ever stood before her with such defiance. Seraphis studied him, her fingers tapping lightly on the armrest of her throne. "You would rather die than kneel." "Without question," Garrick said. The Empress exhaled slowly, her violet gaze never leaving his. Then, to the shock of the court, she smiled. "Then I won't let you die." Garrick's jaw tightened. "What?" "You intrigue me, human," she said, standing gracefully. "I have conquered many species, and they all broke before me. But you?" She stepped down from her throne, approaching him. "You are different. I wonder how long before I make you kneel." The guards on either side of Garrick gripped their weapons, but Seraphis lifted a hand, signaling them to stop. She reached out and traced a single finger along the metal of his shackles. "I will not kill you. Instead, you will serve me here in my palace." Garrick clenched his fists. "I'd rather die." Seraphis' smile widened slightly. "We'll see." The hall erupted in murmurs. Some nobles whispered that the Empress had gone mad. Others speculated that she saw potential in the human. But all of them knew one thing. This was not mercy. This was a game of power. And Garrick Voss had just become the Empress's favorite piece. Garrick Voss had faced death many times. He had fought in the ruins of fallen colonies, seen warships burn in the void, and watched comrades sacrifice everything for freedom. But now, standing in the palace of his greatest enemy, he faced something different. A game he did not yet understand. The Empress's command had been final. He was no longer a prisoner of war, but a possession of the throne. The Virelian guards led him through the palace, his hands still bound in energy shackles. The halls of Luxura Prime were a strange blend of beauty and danger. Glowing vines wrapped around tall pillars, their light pulsing like slow-moving stars. The air carried a faint hum of energy, as if the walls themselves were alive. He was brought to a large chamber, its walls lined with silken banners displaying the sigil of the Dominion, a swirling violet nebula with a black crown at its center. The guards unlocked his shackles and stepped back. A woman was waiting for him. She was tall and graceful, her skin the pale silver of the Virelian elite. Her deep blue hair cascaded down her back, and her piercing emerald eyes studied him with interest. She wore a high-ranking official's uniform, its dark fabric adorned with silver embroidery. "I am High Minister Lizera Vale," she said smoothly. "I oversee matters of the royal court. And you, human, are now under my authority." Garrick rolled his shoulders, shaking off the stiffness from his restraints. "I don't answer to tyrants." Lizera tilted her head slightly. "That is unfortunate, because you now serve the greatest tyrant of them all." She smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "The Empress is watching you, Garrick Voss. She enjoys rare things, and your defiance has amused her, for now." He folded his arms. "And when she's no longer amused, then she will decide your fate," Lizera said, stepping closer. "Perhaps she will break you, or perhaps she will keep you as her pet. Either way, you are hers now." Garrick's jaw tightened. He had spent his life fighting for humanity's freedom. Now he was expected to be a pawn in some alien ruler's twisted amusement. No, he refused to play by their rules. Lizera gestured toward the chamber's open balcony. "Come, see your new world." Garrick hesitated, then stepped forward. The view was breathtaking. From this height, he could see the capital of Luxura Prime stretching far into the horizon. Towering spires of dark metal pierced the sky, connected by glowing bridges of violet energy. Airships drifted silently between them like massive, floating specters. Below, endless streets shimmered with artificial daylight, filled with beings from 100 different worlds. A civilization built on conquest. Garrick gritted his teeth. This was the empire that had crushed human colonies, that had reduced entire planets to ash. And now, their leader thought she could claim him as well. No, he would not kneel. Lizera watched him carefully. "You should consider your next steps wisely, human. The Empress does not tolerate rebellion for long. If you test her patience, you may find yourself broken in ways worse than death." Garrick turned to face her, his blue eyes burning with defiance. "Let her try." For a moment, there was silence. Then, Lizera's lips curled into a smirk. "You are interesting. No wonder she chose you." With that, she turned and left the chamber. The heavy doors slid shut behind her, locking Garrick in. He was alone, a prisoner in a golden cage. But chains, no matter how finely crafted, were still chains, and Garrick Voss had never been one to stay bound for long. Garrick Voss did not sleep that night. The chamber they had given him was luxurious, too luxurious. The bed was made of silken sheets, the walls adorned with shimmering violet crystal, and the air carried the faint scent of exotic flowers. It was a room fit for royalty, not a prisoner. But Garrick knew what this was. It was not a kindness, it was control. The Empress wanted him to grow comfortable, to forget he was a captive, to let his guard down. That would never happen. He sat by the window, staring out at the sprawling city of Luxura Prime. The streets below pulsed with light, alien ships drifted between towering spires, and massive statues of the Empress herself loomed over the capital. Every inch of this place screamed dominance. A soft chime echoed through the room. The doors slid open. She had come. Seraphis Valoran entered without guards, her flowing black and violet robes trailing behind her. The silver circlet on her forehead shimmered in the dim light. She moved with effortless grace, the kind of presence that demanded obedience without a single word. But Garrick didn't stand, didn't bow, didn't acknowledge her power. She tilted her head slightly, amused. "You did not try to escape." Garrick let out a short breath. "Wouldn't have gotten far." The Empress stepped closer, her violet eyes never leaving his. "And yet you thought about it." "Of course I did," he said, meeting her gaze. "I'm not going to play along with whatever game this is." Seraphis smiled. "But you already are, Commander Voss. The moment you stood before me in chains and refused to kneel, the game began." Garrick's jaw tightened. He hated the way she said it. As if this wasn't war, as if it was just entertainment for her. The Empress moved to the center of the room, clasping her hands behind her back. "Tell me, human, why do you fight so hard against the inevitable?" "Because I don't believe in inevitable." Seraphis gave a quiet hum. A flawed mindset, but fascinating. She gestured toward the city. "You look at my empire and see oppression. I look at it and see order, strength, civilization. You see a throne built on the bones of the conquered." Garrick shot back. The Empress turned back to him, her expression unreadable. "You hate me," she said simply. Garrick didn't respond. She took a step closer. "You despise that I have power over you, that no matter how much you resist, you are mine now." Garrick's fists clenched. "I am not yours." Seraphis leaned in slightly, her violet gaze locking onto his. "Not yet." The air in the room grew tense, a silent battle between ruler and prisoner, predator and prey. Then, just as smoothly as she arrived, the Empress turned away. "You will remain here. You will be given freedom to walk the palace, within limits." She paused at the doorway. "Do try not to waste my patience, Garrick Voss. You are far more interesting when you resist." The doors slid shut behind her. Garrick exhaled slowly. He was not broken. Not yet. But he knew one thing. Seraphis Valoran was not just a conqueror. She was a strategist, and she had chosen him for a reason. The question was, Garrick Voss was free. At least, that's what they wanted him to believe. After his meeting with the Empress, the energy restraints had been removed. The doors to his chamber were no longer locked. Virelian attendants greeted him with polite nods, and the palace corridors stretched endlessly before him, as if inviting him to wander. But Garrick wasn't a fool. Freedom with limits was still a cage. The guards, though subtle, were never far. Surveillance drones hovered in the shadows, their silent lenses watching his every move. And worst of all, the Empress had allowed this. She wanted him to think, to wonder, to doubt. Garrick refused to play along. For now, he would learn what he could. The palace was vast, more like a city than a residence. Towering halls lined with violet banners, intricate murals of Virelian conquests, and vast balconies overlooking the capital below. The air was filled with a faint humming energy, something alive and ancient, as if the very walls of the palace pulsed with power. It was all designed to intimidate. It didn't work. Garrick strode through the halls with purpose, ignoring the curious glances from alien nobles and attendants. He had no interest in their world, only in finding a way back to his. Then he saw her. High Minister Lizera Vale stood near a balcony, speaking with a group of Virelian officials. When her gaze met Garrick's, she dismissed the others with a wave of her hand and walked toward him. "You move with confidence, human," she said smoothly, "as if you are not surrounded by enemies." Garrick crossed his arms. "I don't scare easily." Lizera smirked, a dangerous trait in the Empress's court. He didn't respond. She studied him for a moment, then gestured for him to follow. "Come, you may find this interesting." Garrick hesitated, then walked beside her. She led him through winding corridors until they reached a large open chamber. The moment Garrick stepped inside, his muscles tensed. It was a training hall. Virelian warriors sparred in combat rings, their movements precise and deadly. Some wielded plasma staffs, their weapons humming with power. Others fought hand-to-hand, their strikes sharp and disciplined. The air smelled of sweat and ozone, the energy of battle thick in the room. Lizara watched him carefully. "The Empress is testing you." Garrick's eyes narrowed. "What kind of test?" A deep voice answered from behind him. "One of survival." Garrick turned. A Virelian male stepped forward, towering over him. His armor was black and gold, his crimson eyes gleaming with challenge. His face bore the scars of countless battles. Lizara introduced him. "This is Commander Kalruth, one of the Empress's most skilled warriors." Vizalroth studied Garrick with clear disdain. I have fought your kind before. Weak, undisciplined, reckless. He cracked his knuckles. Let us see if you are different. Garrick smiled coldly. Let's. The fight was set. A ring was cleared. Virelian warriors gathered to watch. Garrick rolled his shoulders, stepping into the circle. No weapons, just skill. Vizalroth lunged first, fast, powerful. Garrick barely dodged the strike, his instincts kicking in. He countered with a quick jab, but the alien was too fast, twisting away. Vizalroth grinned. Not bad. Then he attacked in earnest. Blows came hard and fast. Garrick blocked, dodged, countered. Pain lanced through his ribs as a strike landed, but he gritted his teeth and fought on. He had faced worse. Minutes passed, the battle growing more intense. Garrick fought with everything he had, refusing to yield. Then, an opening. He drove his fist into Vizalroth's side. The alien staggered. Garrick didn't stop. He twisted, sweeping Vizalroth's legs out from under him. The warrior hit the ground hard. Silence filled the room. Then Lizara clapped, a slow, measured sound. Vizalroth growled, but did not rise. Garrick turned to the gathered warriors, breathing hard. Still think humans are weak? No one answered. Lizara's eyes gleamed with amusement. You've passed the first test. Garrick wiped blood from his lip. First, she smirked. The Empress is not finished with you yet. The doors to the grand chamber slid open, and Garrick Voss stepped inside, his body still aching from the fight with Vizalroth. He had won, but he knew that had only been the beginning. The real challenge was yet to come. At the far end of the room, Empress Seraphis lounged on her throne, her piercing violet eyes fixed on him. The throne itself was carved from a dark, shimmering crystal, humming faintly with energy. Beside her stood Lizara Vale, the High Minister, watching with a knowing smile. Impressive, the Empress said, her voice smooth as silk. Commander Vizalroth does not fall easily. Garrick kept his expression neutral. I don't plan on falling easily either. Seraphis chuckled, a low, amused sound. She rose from her throne, stepping down toward him. Her long, flowing robes shimmered like liquid stardust, and the golden circlet on her brow caught the light. She moved with the confidence of a ruler who had never known defeat. You are different from the others, she murmured, circling him slowly. Most humans beg. They kneel. They break. She stopped in front of him, tilting her head slightly. But you refuse. Garrick met her gaze. You don't own me. The Empress smiled, as if she had been waiting for that answer. Then let us see how strong your will truly is. She raised her hand, and suddenly, the air around Garrick crackled with invisible force. A crushing pressure wrapped around him, forcing him to his knees. His muscles locked, his chest tightened. He was being pulled down by an unseen force. He clenched his jaw. No, he wouldn't kneel. His arms trembled as he fought back. It was like an ocean pressing down on him, unrelenting, suffocating. Sweat dripped from his forehead. His breath came in ragged gasps. Seraphis watched him with fascination. Most warriors break within seconds. Garrick's vision blurred, but he pushed back with everything he had. His muscles screamed. His heartbeat thundered in his ears. Slowly, painfully, he forced himself up, inch by inch. The Empress's eyes widened slightly. Then, suddenly, the pressure vanished. Garrick staggered but stayed on his feet, chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. He met her gaze again, unwavering. Seraphis studied him, then smiled. A slow, dangerous smile. You amuse me, human. She turned away, gesturing for the doors to open. Leave us, she commanded to the gathered nobles and attendants. Within moments, the grand chamber emptied, leaving only Seraphis, Lizara, and Garrick. The Empress walked to a nearby table, pouring a deep blue liquid into 2 crystal glasses. She held one out to him. "A drink," she said. "For a warrior who refuses to kneel." Garrick eyed it suspiciously, but took the glass. The liquid smelled faintly of spices and something metallic, but he didn't hesitate. He drank. The taste burned his throat, but he didn't flinch. Seraphis watched him, pleased. "You are not like the others we have conquered." Garrick set the glass down. "Maybe because I don't plan on being conquered." Lizara smirked at his boldness, but Seraphis only laughed softly. "We shall see." She turned, walking back toward her throne. "You intrigue me, Garrick Voss. I wonder, if you had the power, what would you do with it?" He frowned. "What are you asking?" She sat gracefully, resting her chin on her hand. "Every warrior fights for something. Power, freedom, revenge. I want to know, what is your purpose?" Garrick hesitated. He had always fought to survive, to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. But standing before the most powerful ruler in the galaxy, he realized something. He wasn't just fighting to survive anymore. He was fighting to win. He met her gaze. "I guess you'll have to find out." Seraphis smiled, eyes gleaming with interest. "Indeed, I will." Garrick stood in the grand chamber, his body tense, his mind racing. Empress Seraphis had just asked him the one question he wasn't sure how to answer. What was his purpose? He had always fought for survival, for freedom. But now, he was in the heart of the enemy's empire, face to face with its ruler. What came next? Seraphis leaned forward on her throne, her violet eyes locked on him. "You interest me, human," she said smoothly. "Most of your kind either fear me or hate me. But you look at me as if I am just another opponent to defeat." Garrick didn't respond. He wouldn't play into her mind games. Lizara Vale, the High Minister, stepped forward. Her silver hair shimmered in the dim light, and a cold smile played on her lips. "Your defiance is unusual," she said, "but the Empress does not tolerate rebels for long." Seraphis lifted a hand, silencing Lizara. "No, I do not. But I also do not waste valuable assets." She stood, her long, shimmering robes flowing behind her. "And you, Garrick Voss, are valuable." He narrowed his eyes. "I'm not a thing to be owned." Her lips curved into a slow smile. "Then let me make an offer instead." Garrick didn't move as she stepped closer. He could feel the sheer power radiating from her. "You have proven your strength," she continued. "Now I want to see if you have something more. Loyalty." Garrick almost laughed. "You want me to serve you." "Not serve," she corrected. "Stand beside me." Silence filled the chamber. Garrick studied her, looking for the trick, the deception. This was the same Empress who had conquered countless planets, who ruled with an iron will. And now she was offering him a place at her side. Lizara's smirk faded slightly, her sharp gaze flicking toward Seraphis, as if she too was surprised by the offer. Garrick folded his arms. "And if I refuse?" Seraphis didn't look angry. If anything, she seemed amused. "Then you will remain my prisoner, and I will continue testing you until you either break." She stepped even closer, her voice lowering to a near whisper, "or prove that you deserve freedom." Her words sent a chill down his spine. He wasn't sure if it was a threat or something else entirely. Before he could answer, the grand chamber doors slid open with a hiss. A tall figure in dark armor strode inside. Commander Talroth. His deep-set crimson eyes burned with resentment. "My Empress," Xalroth said stiffly, his mandibles clicking. "The fleet has gathered as you commanded." Seraphis turned her gaze to him. "Good. We depart soon." Garrick frowned. "Depart." The Empress turned back to him. "I have decided to take you with me," she said smoothly. "You will see firsthand what it means to rule a galaxy." Garrick's jaw tightened. She wasn't giving him a choice. Lizara smirked. "You should feel honored, human. Few have ever traveled alongside the Empress." Garrick didn't feel honored. He felt like he was walking into a trap, but refusing would gain him nothing. He needed to stay close, to learn more, to figure out a way to turn this situation to his advantage. Finally, he nodded once. Fine. Seraphis smiled, as if she had already known his answer. Good, she said. Then let us begin. Garrick stood at the edge of the command deck, his eyes fixed on the massive fleet outside the viewing glass. Dozens, no, hundreds, of warships hung in the void, their sleek black hulls reflecting the distant glow of a blue supergiant star. The sheer size of the armada was overwhelming. This was the might of the Empress. This was what had crushed entire civilizations. Seraphis stood beside him, draped in shimmering violet robes, her silver crown gleaming under the dim lighting. She exuded control, power, and something else, an unreadable intent. This is my empire, she said softly, as if speaking to herself. And today, you will witness why no one dares challenge me. Garrick glanced at her. And who are we fighting? A rebellion, Seraphis said, her voice calm but sharp. A faction that refuses to kneel. They believe they can overthrow me. They are wrong. A part of Garrick wanted to challenge her on that. He had seen empires rise and fall. Even the most powerful could crumble. But he held his tongue. He was still trapped in her game. And he needed more time to understand what she truly wanted from him. High Minister Lysara stepped forward, her silver hair braided tightly, her violet eyes cold. The enemy fleet is approaching. Our scanners detect over 60 warships. Seraphis didn't even blink. A minor inconvenience. Commander Xalaroth let out a guttural laugh. His dark exoskeletal armor gleamed as he crossed his forearms. Shall we destroy them, my Empress? Seraphis turned to Garrick instead. Tell me, human, what would you do? Garrick narrowed his eyes. You want my advice. You are a warrior, she said smoothly. And I am curious. How does your mind work? Garrick studied the incoming enemy fleet. They were outnumbered, but numbers didn't always win battles. If the rebels were smart, they would have a strategy. He had learned it the hard way in his own past battles. They wouldn't attack if they didn't think they had a chance, he said. Which means they either have a secret weapon or a strategy you don't see yet. Seraphis smiled slightly. Interesting. Lysara scoffed. The human underestimates our power. Garrick ignored her. He turned back to the fleet. If I were them, I'd look for a weakness in your formation. Maybe a blind spot or a way to cut off communications between your ships. Seraphis nodded slowly. And how would you counter them? Garrick hesitated. Was she testing him, or was she genuinely interested? Either way, he played along. I'd lure them in, he said. Make them think they're winning. Then spring the trap. A pause. Then, to his surprise, Seraphis turned to her officers. Adjust our fleet formation. Leave an intentional gap in our right flank. When they take the bait, close in and crush them. Xalaroth grinned, baring sharp fangs. Lysara's lips pressed into a thin line. You're actually listening to him? She asked, unable to hide her disapproval. Seraphis shot her a look that silenced her instantly. I decide whose advice is worth listening to. The battle began moments later. Garrick watched as the rebel fleet charged forward, taking the bait exactly as he predicted. The Empress's warships closed in, cutting them off from retreat. The battlefield became a storm of flashing energy cannons and explosions, debris scattering across the void. It was brutal, efficient, a massacre. Seraphis turned to Garrick. Do you see now? Strength is the only language the galaxy understands. Garrick clenched his fists. This was why she had brought him here, to prove her power, to make him understand that resistance was futile. But he wasn't broken yet, and he would find a way to escape. The battle was over. The remains of the rebel fleet drifted through space, shattered and lifeless. Some ships still burned, their hulls cracked open like broken shells. Others spun aimlessly, powerless and defeated. It had been a slaughter. The Empress's forces had lost only a handful of ships, while the rebellion had been wiped out. Garrick stood on the bridge, his jaw tight. He had predicted how the battle would unfold, but watching it happen was different. The rebels had fought bravely, but they had never stood a chance. Seraphis sat upon her throne, her violet robes draped elegantly around her. Her golden eyes gleamed with satisfaction. "A decisive victory," she said. As expected, Lizara stood nearby, arms crossed. She had been quiet since the battle ended, her expression unreadable. Zalroth, however, was grinning like a predator who had just feasted. Garrick turned to the Empress. "And what happens now? Do you just move on to the next war?" Seraphis tilted her head. "War is necessary. It ensures order." He clenched his fists. "You call this order?" He gestured toward the battlefield, toward the drifting wreckage that had once been homes for thousands of people. They believed in something. They fought for it, and now they're gone. Seraphis rose from her throne, stepping down toward him. "You think me cruel. You are cruel." She stopped just in front of him. For a long moment, she simply studied him. Then, to his surprise, she smiled. "You are an interesting man, Garrick." He held her gaze, refusing to look away. She turned and walked back toward her throne. "You still believe you are free," she mused. "You still believe you can resist me. I will never kneel to you." Seraphis chuckled. "Perhaps not today." The bridge doors opened, and 2 royal guards entered. Their armor gleamed under the dim lighting, their weapons resting at their sides. "Take him to his chambers," Seraphis ordered. "He will remain under my protection." The guards stepped forward, but Garrick didn't move. He wasn't afraid of them, but he knew he couldn't fight his way out. Not yet. As they escorted him away, he cast one last glance at Seraphis. She was still watching him, her expression unreadable. He didn't know what she truly wanted from him, but he would find out. And when the time was right, he would break free.